The ER doors burst open, soldiers yelling, boots pounding against the tile. A stretcher rolls in, blood trailing behind it. Training accident. Live fire gone wrong. 2 bullets in the chest. He's fading. Nurses scramble. Alarms scream. But when someone pulls back the oxygen mask, every doctor freezes. It's Colonel James Patterson, the man who commanded 3 tours in Iraq. The officer whose name was on every medal wall at Fort Bragg. He grips a medic's arm, gasping. "Get me your top surgeon, the cardiac specialist. I heard Mercy General has the best." And then she walks in, Dr. Rachel Patterson, calm, surgical mask, eyes steady as ice. The colonel's pupils widen. His breath catches. It can't be her. She was 6 years old the last time he saw her, standing on a doorstep, crying, watching him drive away. 20 years ago, he'd chosen his career over his family, left his daughter behind, never looked back. But she's standing there now, no longer a child, a surgeon, holding a scalpel like a weapon. He tries to speak, but blood floods his throat. Then he collapses. She steps forward, gloved hands already moving. "Crash cart, now!" Her tone is calm, the kind of calm that comes from building a life from nothing. The monitor spikes. A heartbeat returns. Gasps ripple through the room. The abandoned daughter just saved her father's life. If you believe some debts are repaid in the most unexpected places, comment full circle and subscribe, because this reunion 20 years in the making will prove that blood is thicker than abandonment. The night shift at Mercy General Hospital was supposed to be quiet. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, the kind of hour when most of the city was asleep, when emergency rooms saw the usual stream of chest pains, car accidents, and the occasional patient who'd waited too long to come in. Dr. Rachel Patterson sat at the nurse's station, reviewing surgical notes on a tablet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her white coat was pressed and clean. At 34 years old, she was the youngest cardiac surgeon on staff, and one of the best. She'd earned that reputation the hard way. Medical school on student loans, residency where she worked 80-hour weeks, fellowship where she studied under the top cardiac surgeons in the country. No family money, no connections, no advantages, just relentless determination and a need to prove something to a ghost. Around her, the emergency department hummed with low activity. A teenager with a sprained ankle sat in a wheelchair, scrolling through his phone. An elderly woman was being treated for dehydration, the usual Wednesday night fare. Rachel's pager buzzed. She glanced down. Trauma alert. Military training accident. ETA 3 minutes. Multiple GSW. Prep OR 2 inches. She stood immediately, grabbed her stethoscope from the desk. "Linda," she called to the charge nurse. "Clear OR 2, get me a cardiac team. Full trauma setup." Linda looked up sharply. "Military?" "That's what it says." Rachel was already moving toward the trauma bay. Her mind shifted gears. From the quiet night to the sharp focus of emergency surgery, she'd done this 1,000 times. Gunshot wounds, stab wounds, car accidents, industrial injuries. She'd seen it all in her 7 years as a trauma surgeon. But something about this one made her chest tighten. Military. She pushed the feeling aside, focused on the checklist running through her mind. Airway, breathing, circulation, the trauma protocol she could recite in her sleep. The trauma bay doors opened. The surgical team filed in. 2 residents, 3 nurses, an anesthesiologist, all in blue scrubs and surgical caps. Rachel pulled on a yellow isolation gown over her white coat, snapped on gloves, positioned herself at the head of the gurney space. "What do we know?" she asked the senior resident. "Male, age 46, multiple gunshot wounds to the chest during a training exercise at Fort Bragg. 2 entry wounds visible, possible cardiac involvement. He's been in and out of consciousness, lost a lot of blood." "Blood type?" "Oh, positive. They're bringing 6 units." Rachel nodded. When he gets here, I want a full assessment in under 2 minutes. If there's cardiac damage, we're going straight to the OR. No delays. The team positioned themselves, waiting. Rachel's hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. But that tightness in her chest hadn't gone away. Military. Fort Bragg. The same base where her father had been stationed 20 years ago. She shook her head. Coincidence. Nothing more. Then the doors exploded open. The ER doors burst open. 4 soldiers in combat fatigues rushed in, surrounding a stretcher. Their boots hammered against the tile floor. Blood trailed behind the wheels. "Gunshot wounds," one of them shouted. 2 rounds to the chest. "He's going into shock." The stretcher rolled into the trauma bay. On it lay a man in a blood-soaked army uniform. His face was grey. His breathing was shallow and rapid. The soldiers kept yelling, trying to explain, trying to help. "Everyone out," Rachel said sharply. "Now, let us work." The soldiers hesitated. Then a young lieutenant grabbed the others. "Let's go." "They've got him." The trauma bay doors closed behind them. Rachel moved to the patient's side. Her team swarmed around him. "Transfer him on my count," she ordered. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the colonel from the stretcher to the trauma table. His uniform was soaked with blood. His face was pale and sweaty. A nurse cut away his shirt with trauma shears. 2 entry wounds became visible, one just below the left clavicle, another near the sternum. "BP is 80/50 and dropping," the anesthesiologist called out. "He's tachycardic. Heart rate 130. Rachel leaned over the patient, checked his pupils, assessed his airway. That's when she saw his face clearly for the first time. The grey hair, the strong jaw, the scar above his right eyebrow. Her hands froze. Number. It can't be. "Doctor?" A nurse was looking at her. "Orders?" Rachel's mind went blank, just for a second, just long enough for the world to tilt. Because she knew this man. She knew the scar above his eyebrow from a training accident when he was a lieutenant. He'd told her about it once, when she was 5, sitting on his lap before bedtime. She knew the shape of his jaw, the same jaw she saw in the mirror every morning. She knew this man because he was her father, Colonel James Patterson, the man who'd walked out of her life 20 years ago. "Dr. Patterson?" The resident's voice was urgent now. "What do you want us to do?" Rachel's training kicked in, overrode the shock, the emotion, the disbelief. 2 large-bore IVs, she said. Her voice was steady, automatic. "Push fluids wide open. Get me a chest X-ray, portable, now, and somebody page cardiothoracic. We're going to need the OR." The team moved, fast, efficient. But as they worked, Rachel couldn't stop staring at her father's face. 20 years. 20 years since she'd seen him, since he'd called, since he'd sent a birthday card or a Christmas present. 20 years since he'd driven away from their house in North Carolina and never came back. Her mother had tried to explain it. "Your father loves his country. He has to serve. It's not about you." But Rachel knew better. Even at 6 years old, she'd known. He'd had a choice, army or family, and he'd chosen the army. "Doctor, his pressure's dropping. 70/40 inches. Rachel snapped back to the present, looked at the monitor. The numbers were bad, getting worse. "He's bleeding into his chest," she said. "One of these bullets hit something major. We need to get him upstairs, now." "Should we intubate?" "Not yet. His airway is stable. Let's move." They wheeled Colonel Patterson toward the elevator. Rachel walked beside the gurney, her hand on the rail, her mind racing. She should tell someone, should recuse herself, should let another surgeon take over. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to prove that she'd become everything he never thought she could be. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she just couldn't walk away from a dying patient, even if that patient was the man who'd walked away from her. The elevator doors closed. The team rode in silence. The monitor beeped steadily. Too fast, but steady. Rachel looked down at her father's face. He was unconscious now. The pain medication had kicked in. For a moment, she saw him the way she remembered. Younger, in his dress uniform, tall and proud, the way he'd looked the day he left. She'd stood on the porch, 6 years old, wearing a purple dress her mother had bought for Easter. "Where are you going, Daddy?" "I have to go away for a while, sweetheart." "When will you come back?" He'd hesitated just for a second, but even at 6 she'd seen it, the lie forming before he spoke it. "Soon. I'll come back soon." But he never did. The elevator doors opened. Operating room 2. The surgical team was already prepped, gowned, gloved, waiting. They transferred Colonel Patterson to the operating table, positioned him, draped him. Rachel scrubbed her hands at the sink, methodical, counting to 10 for each section. Nails, fingers, palms, wrists, forearms. The ritual calmed her, gave her time to think. She could still walk away. Tell the chief of surgery there was a conflict. Let someone else handle it. But then she thought about all the nights she'd stayed late in medical school, all the shifts she'd worked in residency, all the hours she'd spent perfecting her technique. She'd become a surgeon for one reason, to prove that she didn't need him, that she could build a life without his approval, without his support, without his love. And now he was on her table, his life in her hands. The universe had a twisted sense of humour. Rachel dried her hands, backed through the OR doors. A nurse helped her into a sterile gown, tied it behind her, snapped gloves onto her hands. She stepped up to the table, looked down at her father's exposed chest. 2 bullet wounds, both still bleeding. "Scalpel," she said. The nurse placed it in her palm. Rachel positioned the blade above her father's sternum, right where she'd need to cut if she was going to open his chest, to get to his heart. Her hand was steady, perfectly steady. "Ready?" the anesthesiologist asked. Rachel took a breath. 20 years. All the anger, all the hurt, all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering why her father didn't love her enough to stay. It all came down to this moment. She could save him, or she could hesitate, just for a second, just long enough for the bleeding to win. No one would blame her. He was critical, 50-50 odds at best. But that wasn't who she was. She'd spent 20 years becoming someone her father would never know. Someone strong, capable, better than the man who'd abandoned her. And that person didn't let patients die, even if they deserved it. "Let's go," Rachel said. The scalpel cut clean. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of Rachel's hands inside her father's chest, moving with precision, tying off bleeders, repairing the damage from 2 9mm bullets that had torn through his left lung and nicked his pericardium. She didn't think, didn't feel, just worked. That's what made her good at this. The ability to shut everything else out, to see only the anatomy, the problem, the solution. Around her, the surgical team worked in synchronized silence. Suction, retraction, sutures, everyone knowing their role. Their anesthesiologist called out vitals every 15 minutes. Blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, all stable, holding. By hour 3, Rachel had repaired the lung, drained the blood from the pleural space, confirmed that the heart itself was intact. By hour 4, she was closing, layer by layer, muscle, fascia, skin. "Nice work, doctor," the senior resident said quietly. Rachel didn't respond, just focused on the final sutures. When the last stitch was tied, she stepped back, stripped off her gloves, pulled down her mask. "Get him to ICU," she said. "Close monitoring. I want vitals every hour, and call me if anything changes." "Will do." Rachel walked out of the OR, through the scrub room, into the hallway. Her legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes. 4 hours. She just spent 4 hours saving the life of the man who destroyed hers. Dr. Patterson? She opened her eyes. The ICU nurse was standing there, clipboard in hand. We've got him settled. He's stable, still unconscious from the anesthesia, but all his numbers look good. Thank you. There are some soldiers in the waiting room asking about him. Should I send them up? Rachel hesitated. Not yet. Give him a few more hours. I want to make sure he's stable first. The nurse nodded and walked away. Rachel stood there for a long moment. Then she walked to the ICU. Her father was in room 7, hooked up to a dozen machines. Ventilator, heart monitor, 4 pumps, chest tubes, but alive. Rachel pulled a chair up beside his bed, sat down, looked at his face. In sleep, he looked older, lines around his eyes, grey in his hair. The years had worn on him. She wondered what those years had been, where he'd been deployed, what battles he'd seen, whether he'd ever thought about the daughter he'd left behind. Probably not. Men like him didn't look back. They moved forward. Always the next mission, the next objective, the next war. Family was a distraction, a weakness. Rachel's hands curled into fists. She'd proven him wrong, built a career, become someone, without his help, without his name opening doors. Dr. Rachel Patterson, cardiac surgeon, top of her field, and he didn't even know. The heart monitor beeped steadily, 72 beats per minute, strong, regular. Rachel stood. She should go home, get some sleep, let the ICU staff handle the rest. But something kept her there, standing beside his bed. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was closure, maybe it was just exhaustion making her sentimental. Or maybe, despite everything, some small part of her still wanted him to be proud. She turned to leave. Rachel. The voice was weak, hoarse from the ventilator tube that had just been removed. She froze, turned back. Her father's eyes were open, clouded with pain medication, but open, looking at her. Dad, she said quietly. He tried to sit up, gasped, fell back against the pillows. Don't move, Rachel said. You just had major surgery. Rachel, his voice cracked. It's really you. It's really me. Silence. The machines beeped. The ventilator hissed. The world kept turning. I didn't know you were here, he said finally. Didn't know you were a doctor. Why would you? You haven't called in 20 years. He flinched like she'd struck him. Good. He tried to find words, failed. I'm sorry. For what? For leaving? For never coming back? For missing my entire life? For all of it. Rachel felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. I don't want your apology, she said. I don't need it. Then what do you need? She looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd been a giant in her childhood memories, who'd become a ghost, and now was just a patient in a hospital bed. I needed you to see what I became without you, Rachel said softly. I needed you to know that I didn't need you, that I built this life on my own. You became a surgeon. I became your surgeon. I just spent 4 hours putting your chest back together, repairing the damage from bullets that should have killed you. You're alive because of me. Colonel Patterson stared at her. Something broke in his expression. Pride? Regret? She couldn't tell. I know, he whispered. They told me. Before the surgery, said the cardiac chief was going to operate. Dr. Patterson, I thought it was a coincidence. Didn't let myself think that your daughter would be the one to save you. He nodded. Rachel felt something shift in her chest. The anger that had lived there for 20 years, the resentment, the hurt. It was still there. It would always be there, but something else was there too, something quieter, sadder, Forgiveness? Number? Not yet. Maybe never, but understanding. Maybe. You made a choice, she said. You chose the army over me. Over Mom. I was 6 years old and you walked away. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I think about it every day. Do you? Or is that just something you're saying because I'm standing here and you almost died? He closed his eyes. Both. Honest. At least there was that. For what it's worth, he continued, I was wrong. I told myself I was serving something bigger, that the mission mattered more than anything. But I was just scared. Scared of what? Of being a father. Of failing at it. I grew up with a dad who was never there. Military family. I didn't know how to be different. So I ran. I told myself it was duty, honor, service. But really, I was just a coward. Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. She'd spent 20 years hating him, building walls, proving she didn't need him. But hearing him admit it, seeing the regret in his eyes, it didn't fix anything, but it was something. You're right, she said. You were a coward. He nodded. I know. And you missed everything. First day of school, high school graduation, medical school, my first surgery, all of it. I know. You don't get those years back. I know. She stood there, looking down at the man who'd given her life, and then walked away from it. But you're alive, she said finally. And maybe that's enough. Enough for what? I don't know yet, but we've got time to figure it out. Colonel Patterson's eyes filled with tears. He reached for her hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was weak, shaky from blood loss and medication, but it was there. Thank you, he whispered, for saving me. Rachel nodded. I'm a doctor. It's what I do. No. He squeezed her hand. Thank you for being the person I never was. For being strong enough to save the man who hurt you. That takes courage I've never had. She felt tears on her cheeks now. Didn't bother wiping them away. Get some rest, she said. You've got a long recovery ahead. Will you? Will you come back? She paused at the door, looked back. Yeah, she said. I'll come back. Colonel Patterson spent 3 weeks in the hospital, recovering, healing. Rachel checked on him every day, sometimes twice a day. At first, the visits were short. Professional. Doctor checking on patient. But slowly, they became longer. They talked about medicine, about his career, about her mother, about all the years in between. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. On the day of his discharge, Rachel walked him to the hospital entrance. A military car was waiting to take him back to base. Thank you, he said, for everything. You already thanked me. I mean it. I know you do. He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. A small photograph, worn at the edges. I carried this with me, he said. Every deployment, every mission. He handed it to her. It was a picture of Rachel, 6 years old, purple Easter dress, standing on their porch, the day he left. I never forgot you, he said quietly, even when I tried to. Even when I told myself it was better this way. I never forgot. Rachel stared at the photo, at the little girl she'd been, the girl who'd believed her father would come back. Keep it, she said, handing it back. You'll need something to remember why you can't waste this second chance. He took the photo, nodded. I won't, he said. I promise. Rachel watched as he got into the car. As it drove away, she didn't know what the future held, whether they'd build a relationship, whether the wounds would ever fully heal. But for the first time in 20 years, she felt something other than anger when she thought about her father. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. If you believe some stories don't end with perfect reconciliation, they end with the courage to try, subscribe, and share this story. Because healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing who you become in spite of it. Comment second chances if you think everyone deserves a chance to make things right, even if it takes 20 years, even if it starts on an operating table. Because sometimes the hardest person to save isn't the one on the table, it's the one holding the scalpel.